what else? Of course, iPhone, right? If I have to pick. I mean, I love my iPad.
Right.
I literally have dozens of books and hundreds of magazines on my iPad.
Whoa.
You know, I have thousands of articles archived in my Evernote, and hundreds of pages now of notes in my Notability app.
Right.
But yeah, if I have to choose, I guess it is the era of smartphones.
It is. I have your interview in my Evernote right now. So, just a little bit of background on Pacomas, in case you guys don't know. You were previously the managing partner of Capital, a private equity firm, and this is what I find to be very interesting. I think a lot of people find to be managing partner of a private equity firm, that's kind of like the pinnacle. You have a lot of influence. You have you're really leading your own investments. The world is yours. Why would you leave a private enterprise to do public service?
Well, there's the obvious answer, and then there's the personal answer, right? The obvious answer is when the president of the Republic calls.
Yeah.
It's a bit difficult to say no. Quick, plain and simple.
Right. Did you think about it? Did you say, okay, give me a week?
The personal answer is, actually for many months and weeks before, my name was already in circulation, right? So actually, even when the Constitutional Court declared that then candidate Jokowi had won the election, right, and before he was sworn in, and then President-elect and Vice President-elect formed this transition house, right, and they compiled names of potential ministers and heads of agencies and so on. My name was already there, so it didn't, of course it was a surprise, especially this particular post, Trade Ministry, was not something that I ever thought about. Turned out to be a very good fit, but it's not what my name was being bandied about for, right? So it did come as a surprise, but going into government was something that wasn't completely alien at that moment.
And so the government recently has been involved with a lot of great initiatives for the tech community. Most recently, there was the trip to Silicon Valley.
Right.
We had a contingent of private and public going over there. Can I ask, from your perspective, what were some highlights of that trip?
I think we met the big boys, of course, right? Google, Facebook, Apple. I think all very different, very, very different. It was striking to me. I think Facebook, very relaxed, very different tone. Obviously very social, but just the tone is very different.
Could you elaborate? Was it a friendly tone? Was it
very, very friendly? Very friendly. It felt simpler. I can share with you. I shared with the team at Facebook that I practically run my ministry on WhatsApp. Yeah. So they were quite stunned. Secondly, I mentioned to them I appreciate end-to-end encryption on WhatsApp.
Oh, right.
Because and I said the same thing actually at Apple. Because frankly, being a reformist, can get a bit intimidating, right? Like you're tackling vested interests. You're going against, in this country we have this term mafias.
Right.
I mean, a lot of our industries suffer from oligopoly-like or cartel-like behavior. And basically, if you're really serious about reforming the economy, you're going to take on some very powerful vested interests, and those people do strike back. Right. Number one. Secondly, to be very forthright, minorities. The minorities can be vulnerable in developing countries, and so I just expressed my appreciation for security, in WhatsApp and also on Apple devices.
Right. For this trip, what sort of ROI are you looking for? Are you looking for further investment? Is it where you're saying like, hey, maybe Google builds a data center here. Like, what is an outcome of this trip that makes you think, oh, it was definitely worth it?
You know, to be very honest, yeah, I don't, you know, I don't see ourselves as being so amazingly smart or able to comprehend it all. To be honest, yeah, I think all of you and all of Google, Facebook, it was mind-boggling, right? And I have to admit, we're probably in the first year of a 5-year Jokowi term, right? We're still getting a handle on things. So from my perspective, I think what we try to accomplish both there and, for example, right now here, right, is to share our thinking, is to enable everyone to get to know us, right? Okay, here's what we are, here's how we are, here's what we're doing, and you know, you're probably in a better position to figure out what comes next with all this technology and social media and so on, and vice versa. You know, of course, to the extent that there's any issues, right, any obstacles, problems, challenges, you know, please do voice your concerns, voice your complaints.
So that's something that I want to pick up on a little bit. When we talk about Indonesia as a tech-savvy country, it's something that we're seeing a lot of tech companies want to come in. And there's a 250 million population. There's a lot of interest here. So you had a chance to talk with Apple, with Google, with Facebook. What are the problems that they are facing in terms of their own investment into Indonesia's digital economy?
I think, you know, those guys are probably in pretty good shape, right? I mean, they are very established. They have very clear revenue models. They just have incredible scale and power. I think the tone of the discussion was more, what else can we do together? What more can we do? How can we promote app developments?
Right.
You know, and Google, I think this month or next month is having a big developer conference here. It's already been reported Apple is seeking to establish a app development center in Indonesia, similar to what they've already done in Brazil. I think for me, potentially the bigger issue is how to help the startups, you know, how to help the local players.
Right.
I think we're all aware that the tax regime might cause certain tax disadvantages to local players vis-a-vis overseas players. Like overseas players may not, you know, may be able to escape a lot of taxes that local players are not able to escape, for example. But yeah, Google, for example, we met with the Geo team, you know, Google Earth, Google Ocean, and they showed us what they're doing with the fisheries ministry on tracking fishing boats and helping the fishery ministry to fight illegal fishing. Many of you probably saw that Telkomsel, Exelcom, and Indosat signed MOU with Google on Project Loon.
Yeah.
Using the balloons to try to cover the country with a 4G signal.
But all of this points to the fact that Indonesia's digital economy is booming. And I guess the question I have for you is, every country in Southeast Asia over the past 3-4 years has been seeing a rise in startups, a rise in investments, but Indonesia has seen a skyrocketing rise. Do you think what is it about Indonesia itself that lends itself to this sort of development? Like, a lot of people say, well, it's the population, but there has to be something more than just the fact there's a bunch of people.
I guess, you know, every country is unique in its own way, right? I think what's unique about Indonesia is the particular mix of democracy, meaning freedom of expression. And yes, we have some censorship here, but, you know, for example, I would argue that society here is a lot freer in many ways than say, you know, even Malaysia or Singapore, for example. We're probably not as English speaking as Philippines, but potentially more English speaking than some of the other countries. I think we're fairly westernized, arguably. And then yes, absolutely, there is that scale, right?
Yeah.
Like just Jakarta, it's like 20 million people in Greater Jakarta. That's almost as much as the whole population of Malaysia. But ultimately, it's got to be the culture, right? It's got to be the naughtiness, the freshness, the youthfulness, the humor, the spark, the imagination, creativity.
In your answer, you mentioned the censorship, and in an earlier answer, you mentioned kind of an unfair tax regime. These are major issues that, as you were saying in your speech earlier, we all know about. We all know this is an issue. So how do we actually solve it? Like, is it something that your ministry can do on its own? How much coordination do you need from other ministries? Is this something that we will see, or is it just something that we hope we see?
So I think certainly in this country, policy making is done by consensus. So we have these coordinating meetings convened by the coordinating ministers, and as you can imagine, virtually all policy is multi-dimensional, multi-ministry.
So is there a ministry that's messing it up for everyone else?
You should really expect me to answer that question in public.
I had to ask.
Well, my hope is that it's, if there is such a ministry, it won't be mine.
Okay, that's right.
But actually, it raises a good point. I often like to share with the public about policy making in particular, and also internally in the government. My father was a medical doctor, and in medicine we have this thing called the Hippocratic Oath. And the Hippocratic Oath starts with, first, do no harm. Yeah. So I think the first thing we've got to ensure is, let's make sure we don't come up with policies that actually hurt. And you'd be surprised, that's harder, it's harder than you think. It's easier said than done, because if you think about the bureaucracy, right? 100% of the bureaucracy is, well, not 100%, maybe 90%, 85% is our career bureaucrats. Meaning they spend their whole lives in the bureaucracy. I mean, there's some who spend some time in the private sector before going to the bureaucracy, or some, but by and large, this is very different from the United States. In the United States, it's very customary for people to graduate school, work for 7 years in the private sector, do a stint in government, go back to the private sector, go to B school, go to government again. If you look at Sheryl Sandberg, COO of Facebook, right? After college, I think she spent time in government. She was chief of staff to Larry Summers at some point. So there's much. So whereas in Asia, actually, it's not the case. We have career bureaucrats. So our understanding of how business actually thinks, our understanding of how business actually works, is surprisingly limited. Now, under the previous president, there was already a reform, what we call Echelon Satu, the first echelon, which is right under the minister. He actually opened it up for non-bureaucrats, non-career bureaucrats, meaning from people from the outside to be able to come in. Yeah, still very rare.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, for the most part, still ministers who, like me, coming in. But yeah, you'd be surprised. Like I sit in a lot of meetings, internal and also with other ministries, and we discuss policy, and yeah, it can be challenging,